Imagine for a moment that you are sitting in a high-stakes board meeting, or perhaps just a tense social gathering where the air feels thin. You feel that sudden visceral pang when someone speaks over you, or that subtle electric thrill when you successfully steer the conversation and command a room's attention. We often tell ourselves these are matters of professional ego or social grace, but I invite you to look closer. What you're feeling is the tug of a very old, very heavy leash. It is the same drive that compels children on a playground to scramble up a pile of dirt, shoving their peers aside to declare themselves the king of the mountain. For most of us, this game is played for minor stakes, a better office, a higher title, or simply the last word in an argument. But for a select few, this game is played on a global stage. And the mountain they climb is built from the architecture of nations. For these individuals, the game of power is literal, and the fall from the summit is almost always deadly. As we look into the mirror of history, we do not just see the great statesmen of our textbooks. We see our primate ancestors looking back at us. To understand why we are the way we are, we must step into the observation booth of a staggering 18-year investigation conducted by Arnold M. Ludwig. He didn't just look at a few famous names. He meticulously analyzed the lives and careers of 1,941 rulers from 199 independent countries. He looked at what he called a Baker's century, the 101 years spanning from 1900 to 2000. What he found suggests that beneath the polished veneer of diplomacy and the crisp fabric of the business suit, there lies a hidden biological machinery. This machinery is older than our languages, older than our religions, and arguably far more powerful than our reason. Understanding this inner primate is not merely an academic exercise. It is a key to achieving a sense of personal and social clarity in a world that often feels like a chaotic scramble for status. The transition from the personal feeling of ambition to the global scale of political rule is shorter than we like to admit. The same secretions from our nether parts, the gonads and the adrenal glands, that drive a baboon to challenge his leader are the same chemicals coursing through the veins of a revolutionary or a candidate for high office. When we see a world leader on a television screen, we are witnessing the culmination of an ancient biological struggle. The weight of the crown is not just the responsibility of the office. It is the weight of 1,000,000 years of evolution pressing down on the human brain, demanding that someone, usually a single dominant male, take the lead of the troop. We are often taught that leaders rule out a profound sense of civic duty, a calling to serve the body politic, or a deep-seated patriotism. However, as we peel back the layers of these high-minded motives, a more sobering reality emerges. These rationalizations are frequently nothing more than sophisticated masks. They are the costumes we, as a species, use to clothe what we are socially and biologically driven to do. Just as the pleasures of sex ensure the procreation of the species regardless of whether the participants claim to be acting out of love or intimacy, the rewards of power serve as nature's way of ensuring there is always someone at the helm, steering the ship through the storm. We must deconstruct the myth of the rational statesman. When a leader stands before a crowd and speaks of destiny or the will of the people, they are often engaging in a form of display, not unlike a silverback gorilla pounding his chest to keep the group cohesive. If we evaluate the common misunderstanding that rulers are somehow different or better than the rest of us, the data from the Baker's century suggests otherwise. Rulers do not need to be especially intelligent, talented, or even sane. Ludwig's study revealed high rates of alcoholism, drug use, and even florid mania or paranoia among world leaders. Some have remained in power while being essentially demented, This suggests that the drive to rule is not a flaw in the system. It is the blueprint of the system itself. By primatomorphizing our view of these leaders, we can begin to see the alpha male underneath the political branding. Your own struggle for status in the office or the community is not a personal failure. It is an ancient echo. Recognizing that these status games are biological reduces the sting of social rejection. When you see a leader behaving with what seems like irrational grandiosity, you are seeing the result of a brain suffused with power-induced chemicals, the ancient limbic system overriding the modern neocortex. This realization allows us to look past the suit and tie and see the biological reality. This leads us to the specific profile of the 1,941 rulers who were studied, a group that, despite our modern aspirations for equality, remains overwhelmingly and tellingly male. To understand the sheer scale of this biological drive, we have to look at the empirical mirror provided by the 20th century. Scan the horizon of that 100-year span. Look at the thousands of faces who held the scepter. You're looking at a sea of men, out of nearly 2,000 rulers. You can count the women on your fingers and toes, just 27. That is a mere 1.4%. And even that number is deceptive. Nearly half of those women gained power as widows of him or daughters of him, essentially serving as proxies for deceased male leaders whose charisma they inherited. The odds of a woman gaining ultimate power on her own standalone merits in the 20th century were well over 100 to 1. This isn't just a social curiosity. It reflects a primate model of ruling that has existed for eons in the wild. As noted by the naturalist G.B. Schaller in his studies of the mountain gorilla, the social group is centered entirely around the dominant silverback. He determines the daily routine, the direction of travel, and the timing of rest. This is a truism that applies to human nations as well. Despite attempts at councils, juntas, or collective leadership, one person almost always emerges to take charge. The body politic seems to require a single head to function, much like a biological organism. This lead male role is not about wisdom. It is about the expression of primitive instincts, territoriality, aggression, and survival. The rewards for reaching the top of this hierarchy are profound, mirroring the perks seen in our simian cousins. First, consider the pleasures of the flesh. Among the rulers studied, 95% of tyrants were sexually promiscuous, compared to 40% of leaders in established democracies. Rulers like Ibn Saud or Emperor Bokassa maintained what we might call seminaries, vast harems of wives and mistresses. Bokassa, in a display of reproductive clutter, fathered hundreds of children, famously naming 7 of his daughters Marie and 4 of his sons Jean, a biological strategy to ensure his genetic legacy was stamped onto the future. Then there is the wealth and booty. We see the kleptocracy of Mobutu Sese Seko, who plundered Zaire's mineral wealth, or the national car graft of Suharto in Indonesia, where his son's Timur Car Company was fed by mandatory government contracts and tax exemptions. While democratic leaders are often constrained by law, the absolute ruler treats the national treasury as a personal privy purse. Finally, there is a divine status, the ultimate primate display. Rulers foster personality cults to encourage a sense of awe and submission. Kim Il-sung in North Korea transformed himself into a literal sun, while Rafael Trujillo in the Dominican Republic renamed the capital Ciudad Trujillo and erected signs that read God and Trujillo. These are biological tools used to manage the minds of the human zoo. If ruling is so dangerous, Why does there always seem to be an endless supply of understudies waiting in the wings? Ludwig's study highlights a terrifying reality. Ruling is the most dangerous professional activity known to man. The mortality rate from assassination, execution, and suicide is astounding. Yet, as soon as one leader is toppled, another steps in, often ignoring the grisly fate of their predecessor. This phenomenon can be explained by what we might call the catnip of power. The scent of ultimate power triggers a physiological change. In primates, social shifts can lead to a rise in testosterone and androgen levels. This is state-dependent learning. A person may be rational and cautious while they are subordinate, but once they get a scent of the throne, their brain chemistry alters. They become catnip suffused, and their judgment begins to warp. They begin to believe in their own infallibility. Consider the haunting story of Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the first prime minister of Nigeria. He once wrote a letter to a friend expressing his deep fear that only death would free him from the capital, and that he wished to return to his quiet life as a teacher. Yet, the moment the position was offered, he brushed aside his own premonitions. He took the crown, and as he had feared, he eventually left the capital in a coffin after a military coup. This grandiosity is a hallmark of the high-status primate. It is the same blindness we see in William Shakespeare's portrayal of Julius Caesar. Despite the warnings to beware the Ides of March, despite his wife's nightmares of blood running from his statue, Caesar went to the Senate. He was so intoxicated by his own perceived divinity that he carried a scroll containing the details of the plot against him in his hand. Unopened as he walked to his death, this is a catnip at work. It creates a personal grandiosity that makes the ruler feel invincible even as the knives are being sharpened. They are biologically primed to stay in the game, to keep their feet on the summit of the mountain, even when the mountain is crumbling into the sea. Understanding that we are participants in these ancient systems is not a cause for despair. Rather, it is a path toward peace of mind in a competitive world. When we recognize that our social anxieties and our drives for status are biological scripts, they lose their power to wound us. If you are overlooked in a meeting or passed over for a promotion, it is not necessarily a reflection of your worth. It is simply the grinding of the gears in a human zoo. By primatomorphizing our understanding of power, we can step back from the emotional fray and see the mechanics for what they are. This knowledge provides a practical way to navigate our own lives. It allows us to recognize when we are being manipulated by imagery or personality cults in our own professional circles. We can begin to identify the specific types of primates in the office. There is the visionary who wants to confiscate your heart and soul for their grand project. There's authoritarian, or what Ludwig calls the Apparatchik, the bureaucratic master rules who rules through mastery of the manual. Think of János Kadar of Hungary, a man so lacking in magnetism that his colleagues yawn in his presence, yet who became a master of the machinery by knowing every bolt and screw. Identifying these types helps us predict their behavior and, more importantly, reduces the anxiety they might otherwise cause us. There is no hustle culture advice to be found here. There is no secret formula to becoming the alpha. Instead, there is the sobering, grounding awareness of our own nature. We can choose to engage in a game of power. We should do so with our eyes wide open, recognizing the biological catnip for what it is. We can see the perfumed bulldozer or the Iron Maiden in our own lives and understand that the drive for dominance is a system, not a personal failing. This awareness doesn't necessarily stop the game, but it does allow us to play it with a degree of rational distance. We can observe the unseen forces at work in our leaders and ourselves And in that observation, we find a unique kind of freedom. As we conclude our look into the mirror of history, we find ourselves back at the metaphor of the king of the mountain. It is a game played by gorillas in the mist and by presidents in their palaces. We have seen the staggering cost of this game. The 200 million deaths caused by the wars, social policies, and purges of 20th century leaders. We have seen the specific names, the Trujillos, the Ammons, the Stalins, who acted as the alpha males of their eras, killing and plunder for the greater glory of their personality cults. It is a heavy, often dark narrative of our species' struggle for dominance. Yet, there is a calm that follows this storm of data. By primatomorphizing our understanding of history, we aren't just making uncomfortable truths accessible. We are building a more rational foundation for the future. When we strip away the pious excuses and the patriotic masks, we are left with a clearer view of the human condition. We see that while we possess the ancient brain of a primate, we also possess something truly unique, the capacity to recognize it. This awareness is the only real freedom we have. You should leave this reflection feeling not smaller, but smarter. You now see the unseen forces that have shaped the Baker century and continue to shape our own. You can look at the world stage and see the monkey on the throne without being overwhelmed by the spectacle. We are a species of primates that has learned to wear suits, build skyscrapers, and launch satellites. But the king of the mountain game remains our most enduring and dangerous activity. Knowing it is a system, an ancient biological blueprint, allows us to breathe a little easier. We may still be playing the game, but for the first time, we can see the mountain for what it really is. And in that recognition, there is a quiet, resonant power, the power of a primate that has finally, reflectively, looked into the mirror and understood the reflection.